Hola, yo soy la señorita Erika y buenos días y bienvenidos a Español Comunitario de Brookline Interactive Group. Estamos aquí para continuar nuestra aventura aprendiendo español. Yo espero que ustedes estén bien y que estén listos para aprender más español conmigo hoy. Y vamos a continuar con la exploración de los verbos ser y estar en esta clase hoy. In English for a moment. So hello, welcome to Community Spanish for Brookline Interactive TV. Yo soy la señorita Erika. I'm Miss Erika, here to continue our Spanish learning journey. And today we're going to be focusing more on ser and estar. We're going to start with that, which we've been working on for the past few lessons. And then we're going to continue into our new topic, starting to learn our first group of regular verbs in Spanish. If all those words are sounding like grammar mumbo jumbo, no worries. I'm going to explain everything as we go along. But first, un poco de repaso, a little review to touch base on what we've been learning together. So, como dije, vamos a concentrarnos primero en los verbos de ser y estar. Nosotros ya hemos estudiado el verbo ser, que es to be en inglés, pero de una manera permanente. So we've been learning first the verb ser, which means to be in Spanish, but usually we use this for more things that are permanent. So for example, characteristics about our personality, things about our appearance. We would use ser for these, also to describe different kinds of relationships, like to say who is your friend, who is in your family. These things we also use ser. So generally speaking, we use ser to describe things that are in a more permanent sense. So las conjugaciones del verbo ser, so hopefully these conjugations are pretty familiar to you by now. And if not, if you're just joining us today, hopefully you can still hop in for a little bit quick review. So con las conjugaciones del verbo ser, tenemos primero yo soy. Repita, yo soy. Tú eres. Tú eres. Él, ella, usted es. Él, ella, usted es. Nosotros, nosotras somos. Nosotros, nosotras somos. Vosotros, vosotras sois. Vosotros, vosotras sois. Ellos, ellas, ustedes son. Ellos, ellas, ustedes son. Muy bien, entonces aquí tenemos las conjugaciones del verbo ser, que es to be en inglés, de manera permanente. So this is the first verb we learned for to be, explaining things that are more permanent, as I said. Now, today we're going to be focusing more on the other verb that we've been learning more recently, que es el verbo estar. Estar is también to be in English. So estar also means to be in English, but estar we use for more things that are temporary. So we're going to hop back in right here. So, por ejemplo, usamos el verbo estar con condiciones temporarias, con sentimientos, con el humor. So we use estar very often to describe our emotions, right? Because emotions are things that constantly change, not really a permanent thing. So that's why we're going to be using estar to describe our emotions. We also have the use of estar for condiciones físicas, especially the most common thing that's going to come up with estar is estar enfermo, to be sick. This is something that we will use often for the verb estar, describes a physical condition, and it's something that is temporary, not permanent. También tenemos la ubicación. We have location is also one of the big uses of the verb estar, because again, in general, most of us are moving from place to place. We're at home, we're at work, we're at the store, wherever. So we're not in one place permanently. So therefore, we don't use ser with location. We use estar. And lastly, which we're not going to touch on too much right now, but just to kind of to mention is for the progressive tenses, to talk about things that are happening, these verbs that we use with the ing. And so again, we're not going to worry about that too much for right now, but just if you want to kind of have that for the little summary of the uses of estar, there you have it. So again, the big theme over here with estar son cosas temporarias, things that are temporary, things that can change. So with ser and estar, both of them are meaning to be, but in different contexts. Ser being for things more permanent, estar being for things more temporary. So ahora con las conjugaciones de estar, So again, hopefully if you were able to join us in the previous classes, this is a bit of a review for you. And even if you're new, hopefully you can still jump right in. So con las conjugaciones de estar, now onto the conjugations or the different forms of estar that go with different people. Por favor, repita después de mí. Yo estoy. Yo estoy. Tú estás. Tú estás. Él, ella, usted está. Él, ella, usted está. Nosotros, nosotras, estamos. Nosotros, nosotras, estamos. Vosotros, vosotras, estáis. Vosotros, vosotras, estáis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes están. Ellos, ellas, ustedes están. Muy bien. So this would mean yo estoy, I am. Tú estás, you are. Él, ella, usted está. He is, she is. You formal as in you polite are. Nosotros estamos, we are. Vosotros estáis, you all are. Vosotros being the way they express you all in Spain. And ellos, ellas, ustedes están. So ellos están, they are. Ellas están, they are. Ellas being a group of all women. Ellos being a group of either all men or a mixed gender group. And ustedes meaning you all, which they use in all the other countries outside of Spain. You all are. So again, the same English translations as the verbo ser, but as we've been learning in the different contexts, we're going to use different verbs between ser and estar. So now that's nice and fresh in our minds, we're going to go in to do a little bit of practice. And so last time we did do some exercises to start practicing with the verb estar, but now we're going to get into this a little deeper to do something a little bit more challenging. So aquí tenemos las traducciones. So here we have some translations, and translations are a great exercise for you to practice Spanish or any language that you're learning, because it helps you to kind of put all of your skills together. Oftentimes when we do an exercise, it's very targeted and it's really just focused on practicing one thing. But when we do translations, we have to bring in all of our skills. We have to bring in the vocabulary, we have to bring in the grammar, and again, usually not just one grammar point that we're studying in this particular lesson, but from many other lessons. So it's a great test of all your skills and putting all of your things together. And of course, translations are really important for you when you need to speak Spanish, because again, most of us are trying to speak in complete sentences. So doing translations are really helpful work to prepare you for being a speaker of Spanish, not just a student of Spanish that writes in textbooks. Okay, muy bien. So vamos a traducir. So we're going to try to do some of these translations together. Feel free to follow along or to write along at home if you'd like. So starting with número uno, we have I am sick. I am sick. So again, we're talking about sickness. So this is something that's not permanent. It's temporary, and that's why we're using estar. So here we're going to go to our form of estar, which now hopefully are feeling pretty familiar. So we have yo estoy for I am, and sick is the word enfermo, which is given to us here, enfermo. So you say yo estoy enfermo if it's a man, or you could say yo estoy enferma if it's a woman. So this would be our two translations of I am sick, yo estoy enfermo, or yo estoy enferma. Por favor, repita después de mí, yo estoy enfermo. Excelente. Ok, número 2. You are angry. You are angry. Ok, ahora con tú estás, and here we have the vocabulary word here, enfadado, enfadado. So same thing, you're going to either say enfadado or enfadada, depending on who you are describing. So tú estás enfadado o tú estás enfadada. And angry being an emotion, emotions change, therefore we use estar. So por favor, repita conmigo, tú estás enfadado. Excelente. Ok, on to número 3. They are sad. They are sad. So ahora con ellos, we can use either ellos or ellas, depending on how you want to translate. As I mentioned, the word they in English does not have gender, but in Spanish, we have to be more specific if it's ellos or ellas. So I'm going to go with ellos. Ellos, and then the form going with ellos, as you can see from the banner, ellos están. Okay, Ellos están. And then we have the word here for sad, which is triste. Now, keeping in mind here, as we've practiced in some other lessons, that when we are making a sentence, we have to make sure that all of the parts of the sentence agree. Now, when I say agree, what I mean is if we are describing something that's singular, like as in there's just one of something, then everything in the sentence has to be singular to go along with that. Or if we're describing something that's plural, there's more than one, then everything in the sentence needs to go along with that too. And just like we have in the number, like singular and plural, we also have to make things agree by gender. So in Spanish, everything's either going to be masculine or feminine. So in this case, when we're describing someone like ellos, which is they, so this is going to be plural, right? Because we're talking about multiple people. And also because we're using the word ellos, which is a masculine word. So we want to just make sure that the gender agrees as well. Now, with a word like triste, there's nothing we need to do, but normally for many words, we're going to end with an O or an A, like we saw in número uno and número dos. So in those cases, we also need to change the end of it to be O or A, and deciding if we're going to add an S or not for the plural. So in this case, we're going to have tristes to describe ellos. Ellos están tristes. Por favor, repite conmigo. Ellos están tristes. Muy bien. So again, tristes, that agrees with ellos, which is masculine and plural. Okay, número 4. She is bored. She is bored. Ella, and then the form of going with ella, which hopefully you can do from memory, but if you need some assistance, we have the banner up there. Ella está, and then we have our vocab word, which aburrido, but again, we're describing ella, which as I said, make sure that everything agrees in gender and number. Ella is singular and feminine, so we have to make sure that this adjective is also singular and feminine. So we're going to make a small change and change from aburrido to aburrida. Ella está aburrida. Ella está aburrida. Okay, número 5. They are happy. They are happy. Okay, so another one we can use with ellos or ellas. Again, the English does not tell us about the gender, so we have to just kind of make some assumptions or just make choose one option. So ellos for they, and then are happy. Ellos están. And same thing as we had for número 3 with they are sad, we have to make this word agree, the adjective agree. So contento we have as our base word. And so because we're using ellos, so we do have agreement in gender already because ellos is masculine and contento is masculine, but ellos is plural and contento is not. So we do need to make a small change here, add the S onto the end so we get all together, ellos están contentos. Repita. Ellos están contentos. Excelente. They are happy. Okay, número 6. I am in Spanish class now. Okay, so now we're going back to the yo form. Yo estoy en, and then Spanish class would be la clase de español, the class of Spanish. Yo estoy en la clase de español. And then the word now we have in our vocab in parentheses here, ahora. Recuérdate, remember that with the H, the letter H in Spanish, we don't pronounce it. So you should say ahora, not ahora, but ahora. Yo estoy en la clase de español ahora. Repita, yo estoy en la clase de español ahora. Muy bien. This is true, right? Because you are. Estás en la clase de español. Muy bien. Continuamos. Let's keep going. We have a few more to practice with. Okay. They are in France. They are in France. Again, we're talking about location. Location can change because people move around. So they, again, we can choose ellos or ellas. So for the sake of a little bit of variety, I'm going to go with ellas this time. Ellas están, right? Ellas están, and then in France, en Francia. Ellas están en Francia. Repita conmigo. Ellas están en Francia. Muy bien. Okay, ellas están en Francia. Muy bien. So this repetition after me is really helpful for you, not only to work on your pronunciation, but also the more you repeat things, the more likely you are to remember them. So I know it seems kind of brainless or mindless to just repeat after me, but really it is a good exercise to help you to internalize this information. So I really encourage you to do it. Número 8, Bogotá is in Colombia. Bogotá is in Colombia. Bogota. So again, Bogota would be like it, which is equivalent to saying like he or she, right? They share the same, there's the same kind of person here. So Bogota está en Colombia. Bogotá está en Colombia. Now, a question that I've gotten from students where we have from something example like this. When I say location, we use estar. Now, it's pretty easy for us to understand conceptually that people move around, and that's why estar is temporary. We should use estar with location of people because people move. Now, in this case, we say, okay, Bogotá is a city. The city doesn't move, so why are we using estar and not ser? Now, this is a good question. And what I would say is that in general, we can think about it more in terms of a consistency. So if we're using estar for location for one thing, we'll just use it for everything. So I know that conceptually, yes, the city, of course, is not moving around. Its location is permanent. But if we think about that in our minds, like just the idea of location can be temporary. So therefore, all discussion we have around location is temporary. So hopefully that can help answer some of the questions that maybe might have come up for you thinking about, Bogotá is a city, it doesn't really move around, so why aren't you using the permanent verb of ser? So that's why. Okay, número 9, he is in California. This went back to a person, people move, therefore estar. So here for él, for he, él está en California. Él está en California. Repita, él está en California. Excelente. Okay, just 3 more to finish up this exercise. Número 10, they are at the store. They are at the store. Okay, so ellos, right, for they, ellos están en la tienda. Ellos están en la tienda. Hopefully these are now coming easier to you and more kind of, you can put them together yourself and don't need my help. So ellos están en la tienda. Okay, número 11, Malden is north of Boston. Okay, Malden is north of Boston. Malden está, we're talking about location, is the same thing like we're talking about when we talked about Bogotá. So city location, Malden está al norte de Boston. Okay, Malden está al norte de Boston. Y número 12, last one, número 12, I am on the plane. I'm on the plane. So back to the yo form. Yo estoy en el avión. Yo estoy, repite conmigo, yo estoy en el avión. Yo estoy en el avión. Muy bien. Okay, so just to wrap up our section on estar before we move on to our next topic, vamos a repetir una vez más. We're going to repeat for one final time las conjugaciones de estar before we proceed on to our new lesson for today. Because as I said, estar, we're doing still repaso or review from the previous lesson. So, por favor, repite conmigo. Yo estoy. Tú estás. Él, ella, usted está. Nosotros, nosotras, estamos. Vosotros, vosotras, estáis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes, están. Okay, excelente trabajo. Okay, so we're going to put estar to the side for a moment and continue on to our main topic for today, which is our introducción al presente. So far we've learned a couple of verbs in Spanish between ser and estar, and we learned them kind of in an isolated, unique way. Like we just learned ser by itself, we learned estar by itself. But now we're going to be moving forward to talk about things more in a kind of more broad and more easily applicable way. And what I mean by this is we're going to start learning some patterns of how to make conjugations. So we don't have to learn every verb individually like we just did for ser and estar. But as ser and estar are two of our most basic verbs, but they also are irregular. And what I mean by that is that they don't follow normal patterns. So that's part of why we have to learn them separately and learn them just on their own. But what we're going to do now is to start kind of essentially give you a launch pad so that once you've learned how to learn some patterns that you can apply it to many verbs. So any verb you come across, you can apply these patterns and know how to use it. So it's a really great tool. So what we've already learned together is that hay tres tipos de verbos en español. There are 3 kinds of verbs in Spanish. we have verbs that end with AR, ER, and ER. And these are, we call it infinitivos or infinitives in English. And this is the equivalent of saying things like to think, to dance, to run. These are kind of neutral forms of the verbs. There's no person involved, not by I run or I dance or I sing. These are all just the neutral form with no person. So that's what an infinitive means, is the one where in English we express with to and then the verb. In Spanish, it's expressed a little bit different. So there's no to, no separate word. But if we see a verb and it ends with AR, ER, or ER, then we know this is an infinitive. So basically there's these three types of verbs in Spanish: AR, ER, ER. And so we're going to be venturing first into the AR, so the first group. So basically once we can learn these three groups, we can then apply these patterns. So any verb we see that's AR, we'll know what to do with it. So, vamos a ver. So with that little introduction in mind, here we can explore our first example verb of a verb in AR. So what we're going to do when we come across a verb, so as we have hablar as our sample verb here, hablar means to speak in Spanish. So what we're going to do when we come across a verb and we want to now use it with a different person, right? As I said, the infinitivo doesn't have a person. It's the neutral form of the verb. So now what we're going to be learning is how to use it with a specific person. You know, what do I do when I have this neutral form of the verb, but now I want to use it with yo, or I want to use it with tú, or I want to use it with nosotros? What do I do? So here's what we do. So you have your form of the infinitive, like hablar. First step is you're going to take off the final AR. So it's your first step. Whenever, no matter which person you're going to use it with, first step is take off those last two infinitive letters. So take them off. Then the next step and final step is you're going to add back a different ending that goes with a different person. Now, this can be, I know if you're a native English speaker and maybe haven't studied another language before, this is a little bit confusing at first, because in English, almost all of the verb forms are the same, like I speak, you speak, we speak, you all speak, they speak. There's no change in the verb, we just change the person. Spanish and almost every other language is different than that. So we're going to use different endings depending on who the person is. So for example, for yo, we're going to again do that process. So if I see the infinitive of taking the AR, and then we'll add back the ending o, which you can see on the page in front of you. So if we have something in the yo form, then we're going to have it with an o ending. So together we get hablo. Repita, hablo. Yo hablo. Means I speak in Spanish. So again, we had hablar as infinitive, we took off the AR, and we added back the ending that's specific for yo form, which is an O. Now, if we want to work with a form in tú, instead of adding an O to the end, we're going to add AS or AS. So again, same process. We have infinitive, hablar, take off the last AR, add back the ending that goes with tú, which in this case is as. So altogether, we have tú hablas. Repita. Tú hablas. Muy bien. Okay, now going to él, ella, usted, which as we've seen from ser and estar as examples, that these three people share the same conjugation. So this one is going to be one formula for all three. So this one, instead of adding o or as to the end, we're going to add a. Okay, so altogether we get él habla, repita, él habla. Ella habla. Usted habla. Muy bien. So this would be he speaks, she speaks, you formal, as in you polite, you speak. Okay. Now, on to nosotros and nosotras. So this one, for this, you can see it in front of you. The ending is going to be amos. So again, we start with the infinitive, hablar, cut off the final AR, and add back the ending that's specific for nosotros, nosotras, which is amos. So altogether, we have, repita después de mí, nosotros hablamos. Nosotros hablamos. Now for vosotros or vosotras, which as we've spoken about is the you all, the way they say you all in Spain. For this one, the ending is ais. So you see the ending with the a with accent on it, es, ais. So together we get vosotros habláis. Repita, vosotros habláis. Muy bien. And the last one we have here is ellos, ellas, ustedes. So this is for they or you all. So the form for this one, instead of the o or the as or the a, the amos, the ais, instead this one is going to be ending with an or an, perdón. So together we have ellos hablan, ellas hablan, ustedes hablan. Muy bien, vamos a repetir todo junto una vez más. Yo hablo. Tú hablas. Él, ella, usted habla. Nosotros, nosotras hablamos. Vosotros, vosotras habláis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes hablan. Muy bien, excelente. So hopefully this pattern, this idea is starting to sink in. So again, the idea is then whenever you come across another AR verb, you can use the same tips, the same endings. So for another AR verb, you're going to use the O at the end for yo, the as, the a, the amos, the ais, the an. So vamos a practicar unos verbos más. We're going to practice a few more verbs together on this before we wrap up today's Spanish lesson. So vamos a practicar con el verbo cantar. Cantar, to sing in Spanish. So let's do this one as an example. Again, following the endings that we've been practicing. So with verbos aere, we have o, as, a, amos, ais, and an. I'm going to put these on screen to help you. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. So keep those in mind as we practice for the verb cantar. So cantar, to sing in Spanish. So again, cantar is the infinitive. So going with yo, again, first step, always first step, cut off the last two letters, and then second step, add back the endings. So yo canto. Yo canto. Tú cantas. Tú cantas. Él, ella, usted canta. Él, ella, usted canta. Nosotros, nosotras cantamos. Nosotros, nosotras cantamos. Vosotros, vosotras cantáis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes cantan. Muy bien. So hopefully now you're starting to see how the pattern comes together. And again, for any of these verbos AR, we can use the same pattern. So let's do a couple more to practice. So now we have for mirar, mirar. So mirar means to look at. Okay. So again, we're going to practice taking off AR, adding back the endings. Yo miro. Tú miras. Repita conmigo. Él, ella, usted mira. Nosotros, nosotras miramos. Vosotros, vosotras miráis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes miran. Muy bien. Okay, and one final one, we're going to do the verb llevar. Llevar means to bring, to wear, or to carry. Very useful verb. Okay, yo llevo. Tú llevas. Él, ella, usted lleva. Nosotros, nosotras llevamos. Vosotros, vosotras lleváis. Ellos, ellas, ustedes llevan. Muy bien. And one more time, just to wrap it all up, vamos a repetir las terminaciones una vez más. So we're going to repeat the endings one more time. O, as, a, amos, ais, an. Excelente, muy buen trabajo. So, para la clase que viene, vamos a seguir practicando con las terminaciones y practicando con más verbos AR. Gracias y adiós.